Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank you and Chairman Schuster, Ranking Member, everyone who came down to New Orleans, and for you all taking the time to come to South Louisiana to take a look at all the challenges we have going on in regard to balancing water resources. Madam Secretary, I didn't want to ask this question, but Letmon told me I should. It's no secret that we have pretty strong frustrations in regard to the efficiency of the Corps of Engineers in regard to project delivery. We could talk about the Morganza project, been in study phase for 24 years now. The West Shore project that just issued a chief's report after being studied for 44 years about. Obviously, if that same scenario were in the private sector, that construction company would have been shut down appropriately many decades ago. Right now, you're seeing an interesting trend within the federal government, and I'm not sure if anybody's really paying attention to it, but Mr. Chairman, I think it's something we should be paying very close attention to in this committee. You're seeing Corps of Engineers budget numbers that are relatively stagnant. Yet you saw the president come out this year and announce that he was going to do a $2 billion coastal resiliency fund, which is your mission. You saw HUD last year, if I recall, it was $1 billion resiliency, which is your mission. You've seen FEMA repeatedly awarding grants under Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, pre-disaster mitigation, which effectively is your mission as well. One difference with all of those other efforts that really distinguish them from the Corps of Engineers is that in many cases, in fact, in all cases, those are largely grant programs that cooperate with state and local governments to carry out the projects. And going back to Congressman Frankel's comments earlier about the efficiency of delivery. Why is it that the Corps of Engineers remains stagnant and all of the funding and opportunities and actual progress is being done in these other agencies?
Well, as you are aware, as you mentioned, these are granting agencies. The Corps of Engineers is not a granting agency. We're a project-funded agency. So that's where...
Should that change? I mean, is a project in study phase for 40-something years, is that okay?
No, that's why we've instituted smart planning and 3x3x3 so that we can be more efficient in our planning process. Because I think that 40 years is too long to be studying anything.
Well, I think that if you look at the numbers, I think some of the frustrations, incredible frustrations that we have are being verified in the budget process. And if I were any of the people sitting right there in the front row and at the table, I would take that threat very seriously and be thinking about what changes you need to make in order to efficiently deliver projects. And one thing that I think is really important to connect the dots on, with some of the bigger water flood insurance reforms that happened in 2012 and then again in 2014, the Corps, by you choosing winners and losers in terms of which projects are going to proceed, which ones aren't, which ones are going to remain in this stagnant phase for decades, you're compounding the problem by leaving these people vulnerable with the belief that they have some authorized project that's going to pop up at some point, yet they're subject to exponentially higher flood insurance rates. When you add in levy standards and other things, you're really causing exponential impacts on these communities. I mean, there are real repercussions of these delayed projects, and I think it's something that needs to be thoughtfully considered by this committee as we proceed on the new WRDA. I want to go to the HPS in the greater New Orleans area. When President Bush was president, he issued a document saying that the repairs and recovery of the HPS was going to be completed in 2009. And I've had people at the Corps refute that. I've got a copy of the document. I'd be happy to share it with you. It was when he gave his Jackson Square speech. As you recall, in 2008, we signed a 30-year payback agreement, deferred payment agreement on the Hurricane Protection System recovery work. That work was, again, supposed to be completed in 2009. The Corps came back and started issuing documents saying it was going to be completed in 2010. At some point, the Corps held a day of recognition ceremony or something, which I'm not real sure what that was. But here's the reality. The reality is we're still not at that finish line. Hurricane Katrina was in 2005. We're 11 years later, or approaching 11 years. We haven't hit that deadline yet. What's happened during this time in a deferred payment agreement is that the principle has grown to where we're at the point now that the payments by the state, whenever this project is finished, the payments are going to be almost double what they were supposed to be because of the accumulating interest by this delayed implementation or completion of the project. What do you say to that?
The delay in implementation of which
of the hurricane protection system, the SELA, the New Orleans to Venice, the Lake Pontchartrain vicinity, West Bank, the HPS, which y'all came up with the new acronym HISDRIS because that rolls off the tongue, I think. So
that's the what we considered with the $14 billion of federal investment.
right.
The completion of the other projects that you're referring to, I think, are all on, hopefully on some kind of glide path, the details of which I don't have at the ready at the moment.
Does that concern you at all, though, that the state is facing a payback agreement of nearly double what it was before, when that agency is the same agency that's supposed to be helping to restore the coast and do all the other things in terms of mitigating some of the impacts of federal actions?
It is concerning that would be a doubling for the state's responsibility.
Taking away money for ecosystem restoration and other important priorities. So, thank you,
One
Mr.
of the
Chairman.
things that I would offer is that, you know, when you talk about civilian organizations and that folks might be fired if they took this long, and you talk about different agencies and what they do, there's probably no other organization that has to integrate like the Corps across all federal agencies and get buy-in. You look at something like the 3x3x3 that was put into law. That applies to the Corps, yet we have to work with all federal agencies, we have to work with locals, and they don't necessarily need to buy into the 3x3x3. If you look at BRAC, 2005, $12.5 billion in construction, completed in 7 years. You look at the large proportion of the hurricane storm damage risk reduction, again completed in 7 years. There's no other organization in the world. I brought the Chinese Minister of Water Resources here. He said no other organization in the world could have done what the Corps did. And part of that is bringing all the parties together, communicating and agreeing that in a crisis we're going to get this done. BRAC was a great example of the Congress and the American people all coming together and saying, here's the priority, we're going to get it done, and the Corps can deliver. The challenge we have is we don't have that burning platform in many of these other projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think pointing out the comparison of this other delivery mechanism compared to what we're using right now, you're doing projects like that in 7 years compared to what we're taking decades to do. There needs to be fundamental change in the project development and delivery systems.